All right, guys. Hello. Hopefully you guys had a good last class period. We're going to go ahead and get started with English literature. Let's go ahead and pull out your literature books. So yesterday we talked about the medieval period. We kind of had an intro to the medieval period. Yesterday we said how, give me 1 second, I have to reset this. Yesterday we talked about when the Anglo-Saxon period ended, which was when William the Conqueror invaded England, right? So that was the end, that marked the end of the Anglo-Saxon period. William the Conqueror was from France. We know that. Well, we studied that. He was from France. He was called William. He was the Duke of Normandy. We talked about his conquest, which was called the Norman Conquest. We said how he was a kinsman. The last Anglo-Saxon king died without an heir to the throne. So William the Conqueror was a kinsman that laid claim to the throne, but he was from France. So he was the Duke of Normandy. He claimed the English throne, but as any outsider would not really be accepted in the ruling place. He was not accepted, and he was rejected by a lot of the Anglo-Saxons. However, he was still determined to rule. So he sailed to England, conquered the Anglo-Saxons at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. Which marked the end of the Anglo-Saxon period. This conquest was known as Norman's Conquest, and he became known as William the Conqueror. So because the Normans had, because they came to England, they had a lot of influence over English culture. They added refinement to everyday harsh Anglo-Saxon culture. They were harsh, simple, kind of rural, we said, so the Normans had influence over that. So they brought feudalism to England. One of the most significant results of this conquest is the influence that they had on English culture, or the English language. So this French language from Normandy, the French language combined with the Anglo-Saxon language, formed Middle English. So like we said, the Normans introduced feudalism to England. Many of the English farmers that they had their own land in the Anglo-Saxon period, but when William came and conquered them, he brought also feudalism. Many of their land, the English land, was divided among nobility, and they made the English men their serfs and their peasants, okay? Next, we also saw that King William ordered a census to account for all the people in his realm, and during this census, these were recorded in the book called the Domesday. Much of what we know on medieval England is recorded in this book. William also took control of the Roman Church in England, and he appointed officials like the Archbishop of Canterbury, which is the highest official in England. And later on, we're going to read an excerpt from the Canterbury Tales. So this is something that William introduced to England. We also saw that the medieval period was the age of chivalry. Chivalry was the code of conduct for the nobility and for the knights in England. These codes of conduct promoted strength, courage, loyalty, courtesy, and established certain protections from the churchmen, peasants, and women, so everybody was divided into their own classes. We see that this age, or this chivalry, the code of conduct, was that's the influence factor of a lot of their works. Much of this period's literature was written about knighthood. And we also said that a lot of the times, authors would romanticize this period, the literature, because oftentimes knights would kind of mistreat their peasants. They were kind of barbaric. But authors would say, oh, a knight in shining armor, or it would romanticize the whole work or the whole idea of knighthood. So knights sometimes did not live by the code of conduct, like we said. So it was the age of chivalry, even though authors did romanticize this age. The new French literature emerged. We saw that the English literature was not discovered for hundreds of years during this reign, but because of this, because of the Norman conquest, the French literature emerged, and also Latin emerged as well. Latin was the language of the church, and then French was the language of the Normans that conquered England. New literary genres emerged. It was the romance, the lyric, the drama, although the lyric and the drama were not popularized until a different time period. And then in the 14th century, authors like William Langland, Geoffrey Chaucer, John Wycliffe were prominent authors. And then in the 15th century, Sir Thomas Malory was the most notable writer of the 15th century. And then William Caxton, also in the 15th century, he set up the first printing press in England. And we also looked at ballads and carols yesterday. A ballad is a short narrative folk song which tells a single event, usually a tragic, in an objective, unbiased manner. So this is just telling a story, a sad story, from the narrator's unbiased point of view. A carol is a joyous song or a hymn. It became known as carols in association with Christmas, but carols in the medieval times were kind of defined by the religious aspects of the work. We talked about the stories, the carols and ballads yesterday. We talked about Bonnie Barbara Allen, how this one was where he loved Barbara Allen, Sir John Graham. He loved Barbara Allen, but then she didn't requite his love. So then he died, and then she regretted it, and then she died. Get up and bar the door. This was the quarrel between the man and his wife. This one was the kind of crazy story that it was just a random story that was told and passed down throughout the medieval time period. This was when he was saying how someone wanted to close the door. No one wanted to close the door, actually. They made a bet to see who could keep quiet the longest, and then whoever talked first would be the one to close the door. And then while they were not talking to each other and this bet was going on, two strangers walked into the door, ate their food, and then hit on the wife, basically. And the man got mad. He talked. So the man lost, and he had to go close the door. So that's just kind of the gist of Get Up and Bar the Door. Turn to page 16. We saw in the Cherry Tree Carol the three fundamental doctrines that we've seen, or that are taught today, was taught in this story, or this carol. And it's called a carol because it has religious aspects of it. We saw that, number one, Jesus was born of a virgin. We saw this when we know that Joseph and Mary, they weren't married. Mary brought forth Jesus. That was the first doctrine. Jesus was born of a virgin. The second doctrine was Jesus is God and has power over creation. We saw this in the 6th paragraph. He told the tree to bow down and let his mom have some cherries. So then Jesus has power over creation. That's the second doctrine that you guys would need to know. And then the third doctrine we see is Jesus would die and rise again. And we see those in the last two stanzas. Oh, I shall be as dead, mother, as the stones in the wall. Oh, the stones in the street, mother, shall mourn for me all. Upon Easter day, mother, my uprising shall be. Oh, the sun and the moon, mother, shall both rise with me. So that's the third doctrine. Jesus would die and rise again in the Cherry Tree Carol. Those are your three doctrines. In the Cuckoo Song, this kind of celebrates the return of spring. We first saw it in the original language that it was written in. If you guys try to read it, it's very lofty, if for lack of a better word. You couldn't really understand it, but you guys could see the translation. It's just celebrating the return of spring. The cuckoo is a bird, obviously, that we know, a kind of bird. All right, go ahead and turn to page 17. We are going to talk about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. You should have read this in your homework. Some background, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This was believed to have been written around 1370. If you guys read at the background at the top of the page, a manuscript containing 4 poems written around 1370 has been attributed to an unknown author commonly called the Pearl Poet. So this story is kind of derived from one of the many legends of King Arthur of Camelot and his Round Table. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that or even have seen any movies depicting King Arthur. Also, by the way, can you distance learners just say that you're here so that I know you guys are here with us. Thank you. And then King Arthur, this story depicts King Arthur to be a model of knighthood. Remember we said how in this time, a lot of authors romanticize the idea of knighthood, even though the reality of knighthood was kind of messed up. To be honest, they were given the English people's lands and then they mistreated their serfs, which are their peasants. However, like we said, this time oftentimes romanticized knighthood. But in this story, we see loyalty, honesty, courage, purity, different aspects of that. So this story depicts King Arthur to be a model of knighthood. If you guys look at the top of your page, these are the 4 poems in it was the unknown manuscript that was written by the Pearl Poet. So the Pearl Poet wrote this is the 4th poem of all the manuscripts. The first poem was the Pearl. Obviously, that's where the Pearl Poet received the nickname. Then the 2nd and 3rd poems were called Purity, Patience, and then the last poem we saw is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and this is what we are looking at. This is a medieval romance, which is a form of writing based primarily on the adventures of various knights and others abounding in the supernatural. So a lot of these aspects that we see are they do have supernatural elements, just like we saw in the Anglo-Saxon literature and some of those aspects. Anglo-Saxon literature, the form of an epic, they had supernatural elements. So just like that, the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight had supernatural elements in it, and you should have seen that in your homework. But the basic gist of this story, Sir Gawain, you guys read through it. It was originally a poem. Obviously now we read it, it's a story, but in its original form it was written in a poem. And if you guys notice also, there's different types of vocabulary, and that could be old words like the Turnyd, different carols, that was when it came out. Wheel, days, Hansel, different stuff like that kind of were the vocabulary and the vernacular of that day. So this story, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, we already saw that it's another story of one of the many legends of King Arthur and his knights in the Round Table. But this poem is basically about how King Arthur and his knights, they were partying. It was New Year's Eve. If you guys read at the bottom of page 17 on the left-hand side, when New Year was fresh but newly come, the court was served double on the days, which is a raised platform. So if you guys can imagine it, they're in this hall, they're partying, there's a platform of King Arthur and his knights, and they're just enjoying New Year's Day and New Year's Eve or whatever, New Year's, that's what they're enjoying, okay? It's giving description of what's in it, who's there, Queen Guinevere. It's giving description on the different types of food that was there. If you guys look on the right-hand side of page 17, but Arthur would not eat until all were served. That is an aspect of courtesy, obviously. It's polite to wait until your guests have eaten. That's another characterization of King Arthur, that this author depicted knighthood to be. So they said that they were courteous, they were loyal, different things like that. Another custom moved him also that he, through chivalry, had taken up. He would never eat upon such a dear day before he was told an uncouth. So a strange tale of some adventurous thing, of some great marvel that he could believe. So he wouldn't eat until someone told him a story. That was a weird tradition that he had. Go ahead and turn the page. So these, you can see the picture of the King Arthur, on the days he was there. They were partying, and then it kind of came to a stop when a Green Knight randomly burst in the hall, and he challenged all of his knights to a game on Christmas that he wanted to challenge the knights to. It's just kind of like a tradition that he was saying, hey, let's come up with a game and let's play this on New Year's Day. So this Green Knight comes in, he's dressed in green, he is green, his horse is green. Everything is green about him, so that's another thing that's kind of a supernatural element. Not really many people today are green. And then another supernatural element is when you can see on page 19, not a supernatural element, but another element to this, you can see his consideration is when the knight challenged King Arthur to this game. And basically what this game was is this knight would say, if I yield to you and then you strike me on the head with your sword, then you need to yield to me like later on, and then I get to strike you in the head with a sword, which is basically kind of dumb. But that was the challenge of the knight. So he challenged King Arthur. You can look at the bottom of page 19, it says, Sir, welcome indeed to this place. I am called Arthur, the head of this hostel. Light courteously down and pray, I pray thee, and whatso thy will is, we shall wit after. So he's basically saying, he's being courteous, and he's like, you can come and join us if you want. That's another aspect of courtesy. And then basically after the knight challenges him, King Arthur considers the opinions of the king, he considers the opinions of Queen Guinevere, but then he basically ends up taking that challenge. And then on page 21, we see supernatural elements when the whole game is playing out, okay? We see that the Green Knight on the ground prepared himself properly. Page 21 on the right-hand side, he says, with the head a little bowed, he disclosed the flesh. His long, lovely locks he laid over his crown and let the naked nape of his neck show before the blow. So he's kneeling before King Arthur, or Sir Gawain, which is Arthur right now. He's kneeling before him, and he's basically saying, all right, go ahead. Sorry, not King Arthur, it's Gawain. This whole time I've been talking about Gawain. Sorry about that, guys. Gawain is the knight. He is the knight. Sorry, that's what I'm trying for. The Green Knight is kneeling before Sir Gawain, and he's ready, waiting for the blow to his neck. So it comes, read it down. Gawain gripped his axe and gathered on high. The left foot he set before on the ground and let the axe light smartly down on the naked flesh, so that the sharp edge severed the giant's bones and shrank through the clear flesh and sheared it in twain till the edge of the brown steel bit into the ground. So he basically cut off the knight's head, the Green Knight's head. And what's something that was kind of disgusting is I saw that later on it says that the Green Knight was like, okay, so then he got up, he picked up his head, he saddled his horse, and then he rode off, and he was like, all right, it's your turn to do this whenever I come back. And so that's just basically the gist of the story, and it's kind of interesting to read about, but supernatural elements and different things like that is what we see in this story, okay? Go ahead and turn to page number 23. 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3. This is from the Second Wycliffe version. This is basically just the translation. John Wycliffe, look at the bottom of the page underneath the picture. John Wycliffe, often called the father of English prose and the morning star of the Reformation, is considered by many to be the greatest prose writer of the 14th century England. If you guys have a highlighter or notepad, write that down. John Wycliffe is often called the father of English prose or the morning star of the Reformation. He is considered to be the greatest prose writer of the 14th century England. He is remembered in literature for his translation of the Bible from Latin into English, thereby making the scriptures available to the people in their language for the first time. So we saw that English had not been discovered, written English had not been discovered for hundreds of years when the French and the Normans invaded. So everything was, remember, written in Latin or French. So John Wycliffe was the one that translated the Bible from Latin into English for the Anglo-Saxons and all the English-speaking people to read for the very first time. So know that about John Wycliffe. Your homework for tonight, let me grab that. Your homework for tonight is to read pages, give me 1 second. Your homework for literature tonight is to read pages, let's see, where are we? 38. Oh, no. 24 to 28, okay? Pages 24 to 28. We're going to learn about the mystery, miracle, and morality plays, and then we're going to talk about Every Man. It's kind of like a play, if you guys see that. So we're talking about plays. It's from Every Man. The author is unknown, and it's basically talking about, it's giving the characters in a whole play form, all right? Go ahead and put that away. We're going to talk about our grammar really quick. Okay. Today we're learning, you should have done in your homework last night, exercises 11 and 12, verbs, but we are learning the parts of speech, okay? So parts of speech can be your verbs, your nouns, your pronouns, your adjectives, your adverbs, your prepositions, your conjunctions, and your interjections. These are your parts of speech: verb, noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, interjection. I think I'm missing something. I don't think so. Verb, noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, and interjection, okay? That is your parts of speech. So last night we talked about verbs. Go ahead and turn to page number 12 in your handout. A verb is a word that shows action, links another word to the subject, helps another verb, or merely indicates existence. So we saw this when we were trying to find our complements. We saw that verbs were action verbs or linking verbs. So they show action, link another word to the subject, help another verb, or merely indicate the state of existence, okay? Look at those examples. Dad painted the house. Dad painted. That's his action. The coffee was hot. Was links hot to the subject coffee, okay? Number 3, Mike will cut the lawn, helps the verb cut to make a statement. So Mike will cut. Will is helping that verb cut. The actors are on stage. It merely indicates where the actors are. It merely indicates the existence of actors, okay? 3.2, the action of a verb may be either physical or mental. So kick, swallow, speak, close, swing, build, and eat. Those are showing physical actions. You're actually doing something. Mental action is believe, ponder, consider, imagine, realize, hope. So this is what you're doing. You're hoping, you're realizing something, you're considering something. So you're still doing the action, but you're not physically doing it. So that's your mental action. 3.3, sometimes the verb is a single word. Other times the verb is made up of 2 or more words called a verb phrase. We saw this. It's kind of most often seen in interjections, which are questions. It starts off with the helper verb, and then you would be a subject. So like, will you clean the board? So clean, will clean is your verb phrase. 3.4, a verb phrase consists of a main verb plus one or any more helping verbs. An excuse will serve a tyrant. We just said that. The main verb is the word, 3.5, the main word is a word that contains the central meaning of a verb phrase. In the phrase, should have known, known is the main verb. So should have is your helping verbs. 3.6, a verb must be distinguished from a verbal. So a verb can make an assertion or a prediction, a verbal cannot, okay? So later on we'll see what verbals are. They're verbs that can be used as adjectives or nouns or different things like that. So look at the example, okay? Justin ran. Ran is his physical action. Justin running, okay? Running is a verbal, but it does not make assertion. It's not saying that it's not the verb of the sentence. It's not the action of the subject, okay? So that would be used as Justin running away from whatever, and then that would be part of the phrase. So that's kind of what a verbal is. 3.7, verbs may be called transitive, intransitive, linking, or copulative, or helping, auxiliary, according to their use in the sentence. Look at 3.8. Transitive is the term applied to a verb or a verbal that requires the receiver of its action in order to express a complete thought. All right? The word transitive means passing over. Therefore, if the action of the verb passes over the receiver, the verb is called transitive. Look at your examples, okay? The pitcher threw the ball. The direct object ball receives the action of the verb, okay? So, the pitcher threw ball, all right? So we know that this is our direct object, this is our action verb, and this is our subject. But our action verb, since it has a receiver, which is the direct object, our verb, that would be considered as transitive. Okay? That type of verb is transitive, okay? Look at your example for intransitive. Mr. Gray reseeded his lawn, okay? So Mr. Gray reseeded his lawn. He reseeded what? Who or what? His lawn. So there's also, that is an example of transitive. That's also the lawn is receiving the action. So there is a receiver, so that verb is therefore transitive, okay? Look at intransitive, 3.9, okay? 3.9, intransitive is the term applied to a verb or verbal that does not require a receiver of its action in order to express a complete thought. Their plot failed. The train stopped abruptly. The ball sailed over the fence. Okay, so one thing that you can't answer with this is intransitive. It says their plot failed. Okay, plot is your subject. This is your action verb, but there's no receiver here that's receiving the action of failed. So this, therefore, your verb is intransitive, okay? Linking or copulative is the term applied to a verb that links a word in the predicate to the subject. So basically, when you're going to find transitive and intransitive words, it's if it's an action verb. And then the last type of verb is linking, and obviously that goes with a linking verb. So obviously, there's transitive and intransitive, but if there's no receiver, it is intransitive. If there is a receiver, which is your direct object, the verb type is transitive, okay? We'll practice that in a second, or we'll practice that more. Go to page 14, go to 3.11. Certain verbs are commonly used as linking verbs. We know this. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. 3.12, helping or auxiliary is the term applied to a verb that helps the main verb to make a statement. So have, has, had, do, does, did. And then the last one is helping verbs, and then shall, will, should, would, may, might, must, can, could, okay? Go to page 3.14, 15, 3.14, although some verbs may normally be transitive, intransitive, linking, or helping, there are verbs that can be classified invariably as one or the other, okay? So Lauren plays the piano. So plays, since the piano is your direct object and that is the receiver of plays, it's transitive. However, when Lauren plays well, there's no receiver of the action. It's just how she's playing, okay? So Lauren plays well. Lauren plays well would be used as a intransitive verb, okay? So make sure you guys just know the difference tonight for homework. I want you guys to do pages, give me a second. For homework, page 6, exercise 13. Page 6, exercise 13 in your workbooks. These are nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. Those are going to be the parts of speech we're going to go over on Monday, but just get some practice in on that. For literature, we said read page 24 to 28. And then for your vocab, please write your vocab words, your roots, your prefixes, and your suffixes on page number 11, okay? So your roots, prefixes, and suffixes at the top of the page. Write those 2 times, and your quiz in vocab will be on Tuesday. So quiz number 1 in vocab will be on Tuesday. I'm going to walk over to the class right now, and then I'm going to let some of the girls retake their quiz. But if you guys have any questions, please let me know. For those of you on distance learning, let me know if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
All right, welcome to Algebra 2. We are in 1.4, so go ahead and get out your textbooks. We're going to jump right into the middle of page 23. Page 23, we're going to finish off 1.4 today. Again, your homework tonight will just be to finish review 1.4 and put that into Google Classroom. All right, so that's the homework for tonight, but let's go ahead and finish talking about the section so you guys actually know what you're doing. All right, so we have the difference of squares. Anytime we have the difference of squares, meaning we have a perfect square minus a perfect square, that is factorable, and we just end up taking the square root, plus, and minus there as shown. And we'll do a couple examples here on the screen in just a moment. But one quick thing to note is that the addition of squares is prime. You cannot factor x squared plus y squared. Okay, you can factor x squared minus y squared, but not x squared plus y squared. So just keep that in mind as we go. So example 1.4c. Okay, we have 16, for part A, I guess, we have 16x squared minus 81. Okay, well, again, each thing there is a perfect square. So I have 4x and 9, and 4x and 9. We're just taking the square roots, and one's plus and one's minus. Okay, that's how we handle difference of squares. Pretty simple stuff. Let's look at part B. We have 3x squared minus 75y squared. Now you might immediately look at this and say, well, that's not a perfect square. 3 is a prime number. Okay, I actually forgot to check for the first step last time. Okay, and again, this is one of those things where it's really easy to forget. So when you start looking at something and say, that's not right, that's a good red flag to have. So we're looking at this and we're like, oh, you know what though? 3 can go into 75. So we have a common factor. So we can go ahead and factor out 3. So we get 3 times x squared minus, and 3 goes into 75 25 times, 25y squared. Now 25 is a perfect square because even 75 isn't. Okay, so 25 is, and so now we can factor this. So I get 3, because that does not go away. You have to bring that common factor all the way down. All right, so we have 3 times x and 5y, and x and 5y. And then again, we just alternate signs. One's plus, whoops, and one's minus. Okay, and that would be the final factoring there. In part C, we have 2x minus y squared minus x squared. Okay, so again, we're just going to take that 2x minus y and then x, and then we have 2x minus y and x. And so one's going to be plus, one's going to be minus, and when we go through and simplify, because you have to simplify, we end up with 3x minus y times x minus y. Okay, you'll notice they're not the same because 2x minus x is different from 2x plus x. Okay, so that should be fairly obvious there. So that was C. For part D, we are given x to the fourth minus y to the fourth. Well, we have x squared essentially, so we can go through and do x squared plus y squared times x squared minus y squared. Now the key here is to recognize you're not done because I still have a difference of squares. The first part, there's nothing I can do about. So that x squared plus y squared is what it is. Okay, I cannot simplify that. I cannot adjust that. I cannot do anything to it. But this x squared minus y squared can be further factored into x plus y and x minus y. So that would be our final answer there. So that's the difference of squares. And hopefully that was nothing new to you, just maybe a refresher. But let's go on to the next thing, which is the sum and difference of odd powers. Now, this right here is the general form of assuming n is odd. And I know that this looks like a really big nasty thing, that's because it is. And it takes some getting used to the handle of it. So it's one of those things that's easier to learn than necessarily it's easier to write out. Okay, so we're going to work on how to do this rather than memorizing the general form of it. So we're going to start out with this. Now we're assuming n is odd here. Okay, n can't be even for this. Okay, if n is even, then we have difference of squares. Okay, and so that's really what's happening there. So we'll look at the sum and difference of even powers realistically there in just a moment. But assuming n is odd, this is what we're going to do. And so if we have plus or minus, that's going to be the sign that's in this first binomial here. Okay, and then everywhere you see minus plus, okay, Everywhere you see minus plus means we're putting in the opposite sign of whatever we have. There's a reason for that. It's not just because we felt like being different. It means you swap whatever one it was, it's now the other one. So if you had addition, it's now subtraction. If you had subtraction, now it's addition. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And so again, this looks really scary and really nasty off the bat, but let's go through an example here and simplify, okay? Instead of working on the screen, that screen this time, I'm going to do this, new, yes, Control-Shift-J. All right, cool. So let's factor x to the fifth minus 32, okay? Well, 32 is 2 to the fifth, okay? So we have x to the fifth minus 2 to the fifth. Okay, so we're going to follow our pattern. Our first thing is we're just going to take the root of what we have. So we have x minus 2. Okay, that's the first parentheses. That's probably the easiest thing we'll do in this. All right, so that's the first part. Then the second part, okay, I'm going to take this one and drop it down 1 power. So we have x to the fourth. Then I'm going to swap whatever sign was here, so it's addition. Okay, then I'm going to take and decrease the first power and increase the second power. So I did 2 to the 0th basically here. So now I'm going to do 2 to the first and then x to the third. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We're going to start decreasing the powers of our first term, increasing the powers of the second term as we go through this. All right, then I'm going to have, and again, opposite of subtraction is addition, so we're just going to keep doing that. I have 2 squared, so that's 4x squared. And then I'm going to have 2 cubed, which is 8x, because again, I'm dropping down my powers of x. And then finally, x is completely off the scene, and I'm at 2 to the 4, so I did this correctly. And that would be 8 times 2, which is 16. Okay, I did brackets because I thought I was going to have parentheses, but oh well. It does the same thing. I'm just double checking my work, and yes, that is in fact the correct answer. Okay, so that's how you factor this. Let's say we're going to factor. Okay, we're going to factor x cubed plus 216. Well, 216 is, okay, and we know we're looking for a cube root, so we could just throw cube root of 216 in our calculator to get the answer to this. We get x cubed plus, and then 216 is 6 cubed. Okay, if you didn't know that, that's fine. Again, that's what your calculator's for. As a matter of fact, if I get out the calculator, yeah, that's fine. It's because I unplugged it. If I get out your calculator, and by the way, this right here, whoops, I need to actually activate this program. This right here is why I recommend a specific model calculator, because I can just go ahead and present it here for you. So we're going to go ahead and run math. And so again, I knew x was cubed, so I knew I was going to take the cube root of 16. So in this one, there actually is a dedicated cube root button. Okay. However, even if you didn't, I could just type 3 and then see this x square root. We're going to go shift x square root. It's probably easier to see on your calculator. I'm just kind of pointing out where it is. Okay. And of 216, and we get the answer of 6. So that would be just how easy it is to take care of that. Again, you could have just easily used the cube root button. I just want to show it generally. 216. There we go. Minor details. All right, so you don't have to shoot in the dark for this. Okay, calculators are allowed in this class. Specifically, this one is the one I recommend. And if you have a TI-83 Plus, very similar buttons, but that is as much as I have there. Where did my menu go at all for this? Okay, that was fun. All right, minimize this. All right, so back to this though. Okay, x cubed plus 6 cubed. All right, so again, first things first, I'm just going to simply write my roots. Okay, then I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to have x squared. Now, the key here is if you have negative, hold on, I want to make sure I say this correctly. Okay, so if you have a negative here, all these signs become positive because we're alternating the sign that was here, and it should all, and we do that, and just use a plus sign every other term. What's more obvious is this: when it's positive, well, then I'm going to switch between positive and negative every single time. Okay, so that was the reason for that notation there. You may have noticed that some of them are regular plus signs. Well, the reason for that is because we're just going to alternate back and forth. So let me show you guys this. So we have x squared, okay, minus will be my next sign because my first term was positive. First term is always positive. So we have x squared minus, okay, then we bring in 6 to the first and then x to the first. Then since I used minus, now I'm going to use plus, okay, and this is one of those things you kind of have to learn. And so I have 6 squared, which is 36, and x has dropped off. All right, and that is this thing factored. Let me illustrate it a couple more times. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take any more time to illustrate this. But that's the idea, is you keep coming down with your first term, keep going up with your second term. If your original sign is negative, everything inside your second term or second factor will be positive. If your sign is positive in the original, the signs will alternate between positive and negative, okay, where you start with your first terms positive and then negative, positive, and so on down the line. Okay, so that's the idea. All right, you can see this more in part C, where you have c to the fifth, d to the minus d to the fifth with that one, and then you can see it somewhat here with part D as well. But we're going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so that's the sum of odd powers. What if we have, or sum and difference of odd powers? What if we have the sum and difference of even powers? Oh, there's the note. Okay, I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a minute. If the original sign is positive, the sign in the binomial is positive, and the signs in the polynomial alternate. And then if it's negative, the sign of the binomial is negative, and the signs of the polynomial are positive. Okay, there's the two notes. You guys take a minute to write that down. That would have been useful to have up. All right, if you have even powers, if you guys didn't get all that, just send me a message and I can send you guys a slide later. The sum and difference of even powers. Okay, well, if n is even in x to the nth plus y to the nth, well, it cannot be factored if n is a power of 2. So if the powers are 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, you can't factor it. It's not possible. Okay, however, if it can be factored, meaning it doesn't have a power of 2, the way we're going to factor it is to rewrite it as the sum of odd powers and factor it using those rules. Okay, and then of course differences can always be factored. Basically, we rewrite it as a difference of squares, factor, and rinse and repeat like we did before. Okay, so let's go ahead and illustrate that with a new example. So example 1.4e, we're going to factor each of these binomials. Part A, we have 64x to the sixth plus 729. So I know I'm dealing with the sixth root, whatever I do here, because clearly I'm going to have that, or at least that's where I'm going to check. Obviously in later exercises you don't know that for sure, but that's what I'm going to check. So 64 I already know is 2 to the sixth. If you didn't know that, you can plug it in. So this is going to equal 2x to the sixth plus, and then whatever the sixth root of 729 is. Let me look. Nope. So we're going to have the sixth root of 729, right? Yes. Okay, and that's 3. Okay. Now, I can feel some of you being like, Mr. S, it's in the example. Why don't you just look in the book? To show you guys how to do it. Okay, every now and then I get someone say that, and I'm like, because otherwise how would you guys know what to do? All right, so anyway, we have 3 to the sixth power. Now, with that being said, we want to rewrite this as a sum of odd powers. So we're going to pull out a power, or the squared, and so we're going to raise a power to a power. And so what that means is we're going to take this, nope, that's going to run me where you guys can't see it. So equals this 2x squared, and we're going to say this is to the third, plus 3 squared to the third. Okay, that's going to be the idea, is we're going to kind of pretend, okay, that we're dealing with to the third instead of to the sixth, because that's as much as we'll be able to do. Obviously, we can simplify this 3 squared, as we end up with 2x squared cubed plus 9 cubed. That would be a perfectly acceptable way of writing this. And now we can go through and factor it just like what we showed you guys, and we treat this as the addition of odd powers. And so we have, and then 2 squared is 4, so we can write this as, you know what, let me do that. Shift E, there we go. Oh, goodness. Oh, right, because never mind. It's not worth it. This is going to be written as 4x squared, and I'm just going to act like we did that. All right, so we have 4x squared plus 9, okay? And then this is positive, which means our signs in our next term are going to alternate. So coming down 1 power from cubed, because that's what we're really working with here, okay? We have, let's see here. We're going to end up with, and I'm going to write it out the long way right now, 4x squared squared, because otherwise this gets too messy. All right, then the next one will be just 4x squared times 9, and then we'll have 9 squared. Okay, so then we can go through and simplify. We have 4x squared plus 9 times 16x to the 4th plus 36x squared plus 81. And I don't know why I kept brackets, but there you go. Oh, and I said we should... okay. I even said it, and then I did it wrong. Because this is positive, we have to alternate our signs, which makes this a negative. Helps if you make sure you're on the pencil, not the bucket tool. I'm not sure why my pen got darker all of a sudden. There we go. That was new. All right, so that's what we should have. We should have negative, and I'm sorry on that one. Keep in mind, you have to use a negative if the inside of the original is positive. So now let's do a new one, part B of still example E. Okay, we have a to the 10th minus b to the 10th. Okay, and so this is going to equal essentially a squared to the 5th minus b squared to the 5th. Okay, and so we're going to go through and factor this just like we would expect it to. Now we have a negative here, so that means we're going to have a squared minus b squared. Do you see it? Okay, we have a difference of squares, so we'll have to come back and deal with that later. All right, then I'm going to open up brackets, and I'm going to have a squared to the 4th. And then because this is negative, everything inside should be positive. I think there's a typo in the book. Right? Yes, everything in the polynomial should be positive. Okay? So we don't have to worry about alternating. So this is just plus. Then we have a squared cubed times b squared plus a squared squared times b squared squared plus a squared times b squared cubed, and then finally b squared to the 4th, and I can just get the bracket in there. Oh, and then of course I'm blocking it. All right, so let's move on there. No, like it shouldn't matter.
Okay, let me call him.
Because like if my mic's working, it's working.
Is any of the distance learners?
No.
Oh, okay, so let me call him. Sorry, I just interrupted because I know the class can't hear you down there. Okay, so let me call. Just tell them.
Have I been? Yeah.
I'll call them.
We're waiting just a moment to make sure that my mic's working. Because like I can see the volume right here.
Is it working down there now? Oh. Okay, cool. He just want to make sure before he continued. Okay, thanks. I get you. He can hear you now. I don't know what happened. Anyway, go for it.
Oh, that's what's happening.
What happened?
It's whenever we take our picture off. Well, I thought it just took off the picture when I clicked one setting. It's muting the mic, and it's just...
Okay.
Anyway, okay. Now, I know how to fix it now.
Good.
All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Just walking through here, all we did was simplify and then continue. Hopefully you guys got that pretty well. But that a squared to the fourth becomes a to the eighth, and you know what, so on. And I'm just going to go there. My bad. All right. So let's look at the next example. Part C. We have x to the fourth plus z to the fourth. Well, this is going to equal x squared squared plus z squared squared. Well, I've got the addition of squares. I can't do anything. This is prime, so I just write, if this were a problem, I would write prime, and I'm done. Part D. Like my stress, that was Susie. Yeah, I know. All right, then on the next one, if I have d to the fourth minus 16, we already showed this, but you just treat this as d squared squared minus 4 2 squared squared. It would be 4 squared, so 2 squared makes 4. And that's how we would write this. And so then we would end up with d squared plus 2 squared times d2 minus 2 squared. Here we still have a difference of squared, so on this one I'm going to simplify d squared plus 4, and then we have d plus 2, d minus 2. And again, we already showed that, but just illustrating how that works. Table E on the bottom of page 27 summarizes all of this in mathematical notation, so make sure you have that. So right now, you guys are working on practice green. You guys should be starting at number 31. It does go on to page 29, but if you don't get there, don't worry about it. You guys are working on practice green. You know what? Text. Class work. Practice 1.3 green. And then homework. Finish. Review 1.4. I signed that yesterday in your work, but then told you guys it was due Monday because we hadn't finished talking about this yet. Okay, so this is what you guys are working on right now. All right, so that's what you guys are working on for classwork and homework. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll help you guys with those as I can. All right, I will see you guys later. I'm actually going to go through and fix this while I'm thinking about it. Just pull the camera off the screen, and now you guys should be able to hear me without being able to see me. All right, cool. All right, see you guys.